And so what ends up happening, if you don't start right, you just keep rebranding for yourself, right? You keep selecting and curating according to yourself, which attracts yourself, which if you're going after luxury clients, not the way to go. So I think it starts with that, identifying that, asking that question, you know? And that's what we're saying the shift was for us, away from us and our story to, hey, what's your story?
Hey, everybody. Thank you for tuning back into the Business of Luxury Weddings podcast. Otto and I have been traveling the globe, chasing our clients.
First month back. It's always like I remember when I was in high school playing rugby, the first 2 games every season, I'd be like, dang, this is hard. It would hurt. And this, we were like not traveling for what, four months or so. And then we went the US, Marrakesh, Mexico, Austin, US, home. And then James went to Italy, back to Italy.
Yeah.
And we got home and I'm like, okay, where's my wallet? Where's my keys? Like,
yeah. So we appreciate the patience while you listen to a couple of previous episodes that we've recorded, and we're back.
Everybody's going like, oh, you guys weren't here?
Right. Yeah. Right. No. But today we wanted to talk a little bit about, I think it's an interesting conversation that I see happening on the internet and Facebook groups and on the Instagram, That makes me sound nice and old. What's the Facebook? And that's this idea of like, when we're considering our branding and our marketing message, so many of us, photographers, videographers, planners, creatives in this industry, we start with ourselves. And that becomes the focus of, and we're trying to create something, a story around ourselves that will maybe attract the right client. And when Otto and I first started James and Schulze, we had collectively, 12 years, 15 years of experience with our own brands. And we said, let's start this James and Schulze brand facing a different direction with a different foundation. And I think that's worth talking about and kind of, it's been an 8-year experiment now with James and Schulze, and we can talk a little bit about like, has that been successful for us?
Yeah, because I think depending on where you're at in the beginning, it's like watching my kids grow up. Like I have a teenager now and I'm watching her, right? It's very much all about her. And for where she's at as a 15-year-old, that's great. Because she's figuring out who she is. And so it's selfish. It is very selfish. And I think for artists, or for creatives, people in the industry, this is hard in the beginning because the work is so personal. It's all a labor of love. And so the default just becomes us. And that's good when you're growing up, right? But when I reach adult stage, real success, you want to sustain it, you have to have a shift in mindset. You need, like my daughter will need it when she gets older. She'll need community. She'll need others. She'll need support. And she'll have to shift her view from me to others. And we did this in the brand, and the data, the turnaround is overwhelming. The results, right, for us. Aside from the fact, man, that it made our job so much easier and more enjoyable because it took the pressure off us. And it forced us to develop a whole bunch of new skills, I think.
So just to elaborate on what was that direction that we took right in the beginning of James and Schulze? Because for years, I was focused on, like you're saying, this is my work. This is my aesthetic. Here's how I'm going to photograph your wedding. Here's who I am. And I was, trying to create a narrative that made me aspirational to my clients. So when we came to create this brand and this story, this narrative for James and Schulze, we said, let's make everything about the client. Let's try to get into their mind. Let's look at what is it that they want. What would they be looking for in their, it's not necessarily about our aesthetic. It's what's the aesthetic that they want? What's the story that they want to hear?
Yeah. And man, it is the more conducive mindset for the luxury space, because all of these events are big or small, they're production. It's a village. There's a planner, and there's a designer, and there's team and staff and sound, and it's an idea and a vision. It's collaboration already. So to come into it with a selfish mindset of like, I'm a photographer and here's my opinion on, like, well, if you're asked, right? But here's how I think things should go. And I have my own, like, no, man, like, why would you do this? This is a beautifully orchestrated thing. It's all about them. Jump in on that, that's the way the current's flowing. All the support is running that way. And when you hop in on that, like the whole thing shifts, happier clients, the collaboration's easier, like, it's the way to do it. And it's where we are at our best.
Yeah.
Right.
Talk a little bit about that, Otto, let's start with branding. From a branding standpoint, like if I'm going to go rebrand James and Schultz, or if I'm a photographer or a videographer that I'm trying to get into maybe the premium market or into the luxury space, like talk to me a little bit about, from a branding perspective, what does that look like? That turnaround, instead of focusing on myself, focusing on the client and the luxury client, what does that look like to you?
Well, people we consult with, right? That's the most common thing. Like people, they don't have a goal. They don't know who they're aiming at, right? And so for me, it starts with the who. Like, who are you aiming at? Who is your demographic? Who is your client? And if you speak to photographers and videographers in the US, if you ask 100 of them, 95 of them don't know. And so what ends up happening, if you don't start right, you just keep rebranding for yourself, right? You keep selecting and curating according to yourself, which attracts yourself, which if you're going after luxury clients, not the way to go. So I think it starts with that, identifying that, asking that question, and that's what we're saying the shift was for us, away from us and our story to, hey, what's your story? Because we came to understand with a luxury buyer, especially, since means not an issue, if you can understand their story and what it is they want, how they see this, and you can develop the skill of speaking back to them and hearing it, like that's the sale. You know what I mean? That gives you the opportunity to come collaborate at the scale. So you have to start with the who.
Yeah. And I think it's an important distinction to talk about, maybe the difference between your average wedding, the middle market, and what we're talking about, luxury, because I think making a brand about yourself for the middle market it works, right? If I want to try to be aspirational to a group of people, I want to be the cool kid in the cafeteria, if you will, at school, brand myself that way. Hey, I'm the cool kid. I'm aspirational to you, and people can be drawn to that, and that can work, certainly. But as we're talking about, as you move up into premium, into luxury space, as you're saying, Otto, like it's very difficult for me to be aspirational to somebody who's flying around on their private jet. It doesn't mean that I have less value, but what they care about and what they can experience is different than what I can provide.
Yeah.
Right. From my middle class mindset, from my middle class buying psychology, from my middle class, the power of the dollar, if you will. Yeah. I can only create certain experiences that may or may not be interesting to them.
Yeah. So totally. Yeah. Just as you start a brand, James, you have to understand that who you're talking to, because otherwise you'll make the wrong pitch, right? Because if everything is at your disposal, the question changes, and so does the answer, right? It's not the same. Like our buying mindset and theirs is not the same, and so the pitch cannot be the same. And it's not, like we talk about this a lot in the community, right? Like if you go to a Walmart or you go to a Prada store, like they're both selling something. It's a retail outlet. There's tools, there's credit cards, like they all take Visa and MasterCard, but it's not the same pitch at all. And the pitch is also not happening at the same levels. Like it's not, you know what I mean? It's happening in different locations. It's very strategic, you know? You're not going to see a Gucci ad in the local Hiron's Ranch newspaper. You'll see a Walmart one, you know, but then you'll see it. So it's very interesting.
Yeah.
It is very interesting.
One of my favorite things about this shift is the how I've been re-energized in the craft of photography. Because the way we're looking at this, and we say this often to clients, it's we are not coming to your wedding with a preconceived idea, right? Here's the aesthetic, here's the thing that we're doing. We're coming fully trying to connect and understand who you are and what's important to you. And that's how we're going to take that brief and we're going to photograph that. So for some weddings, we're coming at it with a very documentary mindset, right? The client has talked about family and experience and all the activities they're going to do and them wanting to be in the moment. And so we're going to approach the wedding very much that way. Small footprint, out of the way, not seen. On the flip side, we might have some clients that come and go, fashion is the most important thing to me. I want to look beautiful. The style is important. The production part is important.
I want to be followed around. I want that. Yeah.
Yeah. And so now all of a sudden we turn into portrait and fashion photographers, at least for certain times throughout the day. Give them more of that splash, more of a, more of an experience from a like show perspective. And that's fun as well. So, and kind of everything in between. Like, family's important. Yeah. It's the most important thing to me. More family portraits, like everywhere throughout the day. It's been really fun for me.
It's funny as I listen to you, the old me takes offense at that. It seems so inauthentic, like, you're like a chameleon. You're just changing for them. The old artist in me, the struggling artist, by the way, worth pointing out, would revolt against that and say, no, I am Otto. I am a fine art documentary photographer. I document like this. Family photos? Yuck. No, not real. But as a business, that was maybe like not a happy art. I don't know. That was a struggling business model. This model is far more successful. And also, by the way, there's plenty of space for the fine art documentary photographer to still get weird and reactive and serve the client. And make more money. So it's like, yeah.
But what you're saying though is like, I could hear some people going, so basically what you're saying is you've sold out. Yeah. You sold out to whatever they want. That's what you're going to give them. So how did you get then, Otto? How did you get from kind of that mindset to this mindset of like, serving? Like, what is it that you want? What is your vision? I want to execute on that. How did you make that jump and in a satisfying way for you?
I mean, the other way just wasn't working, right? Like you get to some point at that price point, there had to be so much shooting. So at some point you're like, I need to move out of this market and into another one. And when I got to the other market, started getting into it, I'm like, things are quite different here. It doesn't work the same, And then you start playing with that and pushing into it and changing things. And, this works better than that. It's just that simple. It's the same as like how we used to price versus how we price now, which was rigid and priceless and packages. And the first time somebody pitched the idea of a dynamic model, the reaction is like, no, that's not. And then you look into it and you're like, that's much better than this. The data is, and so it's the same here for me. Yeah. It's just...
And I think it doesn't, it's not, I don't know that it's mutually exclusive. Like in the luxury market, you can only do it the way we're talking about, right? I think there's plenty of photographers out there that say, here's how I do it. This is my way. This is my aesthetic. And people are going to hire you for that. Right. I think, and it's just a smaller niche. And I think that can work as well. But I've found so much joy from doing it this other way of approaching from a service standpoint, to go and almost like an advertising photographer to say, look, I've got all these tools in my toolbox as a photographer. I can create portraits. I can create documentary photography. I can create family heirlooms with a well-composed, well-lighted family photo, all these things. I have all these tools. Tell me what is most important to you. And we can go craft what we like to say, a portrait of an event, right? We can craft all these elements so that it fits your vision. And to me, that's just been so exciting, and because it's different every single time.
Yeah.
And my ADHD brain goes, "Oh, I like different every time."
Yeah, no, for sure. The other thing that changed for me, man, is as we started stepping into luxury a little bit more, or when you working with top planner, top designer, top venue, the more we did, I recognized all of them were obsessed with serving the client. None of them are walking around going, I am Michelle Rago, I am Rishi, I am then. All of them were the attitude you're describing. That was their attitude. To serve, all about the client, you know. And so I noticed that very quickly. This old mindset of like, I'm here. It just doesn't fly. There's no space for it.
What do you think it's done to the work? Like this approach? Because I'm not sure I don't think we anticipated what would happen to the work. Right? Like I think we were like, this is more of a branding perspective in the beginning, and maybe almost a marketing thing, like putting out into the world, like this is about you, and a selling aspect. What do you think happened to the work when we did that?
Yeah, I think it informed the work, and I think the work got a whole lot more precise, right?
What do you mean precise? Talk about that more.
It's like saying you need to exercise. Okay, but exercise for what, right? So if you're exercising to build muscle, you're exercising a specific way. If you're exercising for an endurance event, you're exercising a specific way. And so I think it's the same here, you know? It's just that intentionality of it. I lost my train of thought there, so just back it off.
No, that's okay. I'm just kidding. I mean, let me push into that more, and I don't want to be the one interviewing you, but I'm kind of curious to hear, like, because if there's like a more technical one of the pair with between you and me, it's you. It's more you're more about crafting, composing, all of these things. So I'm kind of curious in your mind, like, how did that shift of the work or the shift of the approach change the work?
No, big time, because it gave us something to aim at, right? Because now you find if you put on that brand identity, and we say do that, like there's Otto and there's James, and then there's James and Schulze, distinct. If you put on that identity, right, like now I come out and I'm shooting as beauty, style, legacy. So I'm looking for beauty, style, and we define those words, right? So there's story behind it. There's story. It's infused with story, and we act accordingly. And so your brain follows, and so you look for that. You know, and you play with it and you iterate. And so where before it was mostly just, that's fine too, especially coming from a photojournalistic documentary background. You just step into the space and you get what you get, you grab what you can. And I think at a certain level, and for some, like a John Dolan, that works. That's the brand story, is he's just going to come and he's going to get what he gets. But like for our market right now, it's like we are serving the clients, we're serving the planners, we're serving the design team. And so we felt the need for, flow, let it flow, but a little bit more precision. I think this brings that.
And as I hear you talk, I think of like all the different aspects of the day, because for a client, and we have to pick up on this really quickly in a 30-minute, 40-minute call, trying to understand.
That's cool. That's a skill we've learned, right? I've watched that skill more than anything. Like when we joined forces, our photography, the work has gotten better. That's like a skill that there's a ceiling there, and now we came together and that ceiling went up collectively. But this skill of reading people or understanding, you know, pulling that out, that's the big one.
Yeah, and just to give listeners maybe more of a concrete example of what we're kind of talking about here is from a photographing standpoint is, you know, if a client is saying, look, we're about experience. I don't really care about the details at all. We want to have fun. Like when I walk into that getting ready space, you know, I'm not immediately hanging up a dress to photograph it and shooting the shoes, and that goes out the window because the client doesn't care about it. They've been clearly said, like, I don't care about the details. I don't need a photo of my dress hanging in the windows. All of a sudden, a whole new world opens up to you. Because now it's about interacting. It's like watching for interaction. And yes, that's what we do as wedding photographers anyhow.
It sharpens it.
Watching.
No, it sharpens it.
That's right. It sharpens it. And I don't have to be distracted by where do I got to find great light for this dress to hang it? And it's going to look good on her anyhow. Let's just focus on these moments.
Yeah. And I think at this level, that's what you're talking about. That's what's required. It's that anticipation of a need. That's what it is, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And then how that translates to different aspects of the day.
Well, right? No, it flows back again. Now, when you're culling the wedding and you're curating it down again, that mindset's again in play. And over the years, it develops. That becomes really precise, and it's how we learn. It's how we, and to your original question, that's how a brand, that's how it comes into being, right? That's all the parts of it.
Yeah. And I think that it flows over a little bit what you were talking about earlier, but it flows over into the relationships and the collaborations with other creative partners, the planner, the designers, right? When you have this service, this is about you or about the client, I should say, the collaboration becomes even more important because as we were talking with Peyton Frank a couple months ago, like, how do we work together to serve this client to the best of our ability with their vision in mind, right? And if everybody's doing that, and that's what I'm experiencing more and more and more at the level of weddings we're doing. And I don't know if it's because the wedding planners that we're working with are so good at hosting and so good at catching a vision and translating that vision, not only from the client, but then walking us through the space and saying this here, that there. This is what's important. All these things, like the collaboration just gets bumped up and elevated.
Yeah. Because then everybody, it's like with photographers, we talk about this a lot. It's like the difference between shooting a model and a regular person. It's elevated. The model knows what to give you. And I think at this level, that's the case. Everything is like set up. And so you can stay in your lane. You can be a specialist, and so... But that's part of it, right? Precision on the front end, precision out. Like if you're not precise as a brand, you will not attract precise. The precise won't, again, now we're talking about consistently over time.
Yeah. Well, the other part of that I'm thinking about this, I'm reading a book currently on communication and specifically on validation. And it strikes me as like these two parallel ideas of, in interpersonal relationships, trying to bring validation to somebody's feelings, right? From a sales perspective, and I'm trying to bring these two together, but I'm thinking about our sales calls. And when we're talking to a client or talking to a planner, and you're really listening and you're really hearing not only their hopes and dreams and vision for this day that they're planning, but also their worries and their concerns, and you're validating all of those feelings. And not that this is manipulative in any way, but I think it really actually helps to elevate and improve the sales process when you actually are listening and not trying to just go, here's everything about me. Here's how I operate. It's more, tell me about you. How can we operate to serve you better? And that validation, I think, is a huge point of emphasis for making the sale more successful.
Yeah, huge.
I went way off. I feel like I went way off the rail there.
But that's fine. It's just making it about them, right? That's what you're talking about. Yeah, that's it. Feeding that back, listening and feeding it back. I hear what you're saying. I get it. Yeah, totally. That's how, it's all of that.
So we want to, it's a busy time for us. We know it's coming up on a really busy time for everybody in the wedding industry. We're going to keep these a bit shorter here in the coming months. But as we wrap this up, I just want to challenge anybody who's listening here. Go take a look at your website about page. Read it through and go, if I were the client, is this speaking to me and what I want and my vision? Or is this all about the photographer? And if you're trying to think of like, hey, maybe I could make this transition to this type of approach, maybe rethink how that comes across and how you can rewrite that with a client's vision in mind, with their concerns, with their desires in mind, as opposed to just your own.
Yeah, it's a good exercise.
I think you might find it to be an interesting exercise.
And do that with less words. Not more new words, less. Because this is the end again, branding. Less is more. The more precise you can get with it, that's the goal. Not more. That's not branding, that's information.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and look, I'd love to have hear your thoughts on this in the comments here below. Tell us what you think, because continue the conversation there. Because I'm just curious how that gets received, how that changes the way people think about what it is I do on the wedding day. I think it could be an interesting conversation to have.
No doubt. Cheers, everybody.